Welcome to the channel. We're back doing some more brightness tests on various handhelds. We have 4 additional ones to add to the pile, and we have tested all these for their screen brightness. If you're interested in the methodology of these tests, I will link my first video in the description on handheld brightness, which has a description of how I'm testing these things, what setup I'm using, and so forth. If you just want to skip to the end, feel free to use the timestamps. All the results for all, and this will be 13 different handhelds I've tested, will be at the end in the results and final thoughts section. But today we have a few more handhelds to add to the pile, and as you can see, we have a very large one here, which we'll get to. But we're going to take a look at these 4 systems and see how they do in terms of brightness. Here is the PSP Go. This is, I believe, the second to last model of PSP ever made. I think the last one was the PSP Street, the E1000, but this was kind of the premium model of PSP, and compared to the other PSP I tested, this one actually does have a significantly brighter screen. In the conditions of our tests, we got 110 lux on this, which is actually noticeably better than the PSP 3000 I have. I haven't tested the older models of PSP yet, but I suspect it's brighter than most of them as well. Here is a device that Anbernic probably wishes that you would forget that they ever made. This is Anbernic's one and only Windows-based handheld, the Anbernic WIN600. And to say it's kind of underpowered would be, kind of an understatement. It's not all that good at emulation and not all that good at running PC games, although there's a few things that are nice about it. I actually have a kind of full review of this handheld and another video on my channel if you're interested in learning more about the WIN600. I don't really recommend that you buy it unless you can pick it up at a fire sale price, because it's not really that good of a game machine, although it's it's a quirky little device, and it actually is upgradable. You can upgrade the RAM, you can upgrade the SSD without too much trouble, which is a little bit rare for some of these little PC devices. But unfortunately, it's hampered by a quite slow processor and graphics. So it'll run some basic games. But we tested this one, and under the conditions of the test, I got 212 lux, which is pretty comparable to most of the, I'm going to say, modern handhelds that I tested. It's right there, kind of in the middle of that handhelds that have been released over the past few years back. But this is a kind of a niche device, so I just figured I'd put it in there since I have one. But 212 lux is what we got for the Anbernic WIN600. This is the Anbernic RG405M. This was a fairly popular device probably a year or so ago. It has a nice 4:3 aspect ratio screen. It is very small, and this particular one is metallic, which is kind of premium feeling. And we tested this one under the conditions we tested the other handhelds at, and got a brightness of 214 lux, which is kind of middle of the pack for the relatively recent retro handhelds. And one thing I should mention about this is, of pretty much all of the handhelds that I tested, I think, at least so far, this device actually has the worst viewing angles. So it looks really good if you're looking at it dead on, but if you tilt the screen even just a little bit, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but the image brightness goes way down. So this is a very directional screen, you might say. So, and I just mentioned that because I noticed it more on this screen, I think, on the RG405M than I noticed it on any of the other handhelds. But still, as long as you're looking at it dead on, you get a respectable brightness, at least compared to these other handhelds at 214 lux. Hail to the king. It's the Steam Deck OLED edition. This screen, I never use this at full brightness, and it's not on full brightness right now, actually. But when I tested it, this is the brightest handheld gaming system that I actually own. 474 lux in the test conditions here, which makes it head and shoulders above every other system, at least as of the making of this video, that I've tested. And this is a big, beautiful, brilliant screen. If you are into retro emulation, the Steam Deck is excellent. Of course, the only, you might say, disadvantage of the Steam Deck is it's kind of big. It completely dwarfs a lot of these other retro handhelds. Even stuff like the WIN600 is pretty tiny compared to the Steam Deck. So it's a beautiful device. It runs pretty much any emulation you need, and it also runs Steam games, of course. And it has an excellent screen, and it's extremely bright. So aside from the fact that this is like huge, this is probably one of the best emulation and just general retro gaming kind of devices you can buy. It's though not for somebody that wants to carry anything around in a small bag. But the Steam Deck OLED was definitely the brightest, most colorful screen, like I said, of any of the handheld devices that I've tested so far. Maybe someone will dethrone the king. We'll see. But so far, this is by far the brightest of all of my gaming handhelds. So, to sum up, I have made a little table like my last video comparing the brightness of all the handhelds I've tested so far. Again, for methodology information, just put a link to my earlier video in the description, which tells you how I made all these tests, what setup I use, what device I use, and so forth. And let's take a look. So here is the head-to-head for all the handhelds I've tested. Of course, the Steam Deck comes out way on top of all of the other handhelds I have in terms of brightness. You can almost say it's retina-searingly bright, and you will not have trouble seeing that screen in pretty much any lighting conditions. Now, second place goes to the RG405M, which has a pretty darn bright screen. It's another nice bright OLED screen, and probably the best screen you can get on one of these handhelds without paying more than $200 for it. And of course, we have some middle of the pack ones around here. A lot of the recent retro handhelds are all around the same brightness. The little meter that I have, I would not treat a very small difference in brightness that was measured on this kind of inexpensive meter here. I wouldn't treat a small difference in brightness and being significant, especially given the limitations of how I'm testing them here. So, I mean, I don't see any significant difference between 214 and 212 on the chart, for example. I think it's more useful to look at the kind of percentages relative to each other. So I've got percentage brightness kind of it's compared to the original Sony PSP 3000 that I have, and you can see that the modern handhelds are significantly brighter, which probably is one of the reasons why we like playing on them. It's a lot easier to see the screen. And of course, what that does is kind of makes all the numbers look big. So if we compare instead to the brightest handheld, then we see that stuff like the Odin 2, for example, is about half as bright as the Steam Deck. And, things like even the Ally, which is another PC handheld, is not nearly as bright as the Steam Deck is. Again, it's about half the brightness. So, it's good if you want to know, if you have one of these systems and you're thinking about getting another one. It's like, okay, well, am I going to get kind of an upgrade in the visibility of my screen is going to be about the same, or is it going to be a downgrade, at least in terms of brightness? And to pick kind of a middle-of-the-road system, I've also had a version of this chart with compared to the Odin 2, which is probably my favorite retro handheld at the moment out of all of these. Yeah, at least just for being portable in retro games, because, well, it plays pretty much everything Android can, and it's got a huge battery. So I put that one as the reference point. You can see a couple of handhelds kind of beat it in brightness. The RG556 certainly significantly does. The Retroid Pocket 3 is a little brighter, but more washed out in terms of colors than the Odin 2 is. And of course, the Steam Deck just stomps all over everybody here. But you can see a lot of the handhelds fall within this middle range brightness, and you can clearly see, though, that the older handhelds, like the PSPs and the DSs and so forth, are generally significantly dimmer than the new devices. So that's just kind of a summary of all these different handhelds here. If you like the video, feel free to leave a like. If you have any questions or comments, certainly leave a comment in the comment section. And if you'd like to see more of this handheld and gaming content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next video.